Hey, it's Sam from Sugar Spun Run, and today we're going to be making Fruity Pebbles cookies. This recipe makes some pretty big and very colorful cookies. They have a nice fruit flavored twist. We don't really eat these things for breakfast, but we really do enjoy using them in our desserts around here. So let's go ahead and get started. You don't need to preheat your oven just yet because we're going to be chilling our dough, but you are going to want to grab yourself a large mixing bowl. So we're going to be starting with 1 cup of softened unsalted butter. And one thing that I want to mention to you about using softened butter, softened does not mean melty or oily. So softened butter should ideally actually be about 68 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's not super warm. It has a slight chill to it still. And I think that's worth mentioning because we're going to be creaming our butter with our sugar, and you want it to still be a little bit firm, have a little bit of that chill, because then it's going to cream properly and give the cookie the structure it's supposed to have. Otherwise, you could end up with flatter cookies that spread a little bit more. All right, next we're going to be adding 1.5 cups of granulated sugar, and we're just using granulated sugar, not brown sugar, because the brown sugar kind of took away from the fruity flavor we were going for. All right, so as I mentioned, we're going to be creaming the butter and sugar together, and you do want this to get nice and light and fluffy. I'm using an electric mixer, but you could certainly use a stand mixer with a paddle attachment instead if you prefer. I find it usually takes about 1.5 minutes or 2 minutes of mixing to get the butter and sugar to the texture and consistency that I want it to be. All right, our cookie dough is looking good at this point. Nicely creamed, light and fluffy and creamy. So next we're going to add our eggs. Now we're going to be using 2 large eggs for today's recipe, and these should ideally be at room temperature. Colorful cookies, so we'll use a colorful egg. So we're going to add our 2 large eggs, and we're also going to add our extract. So for today's recipe, we are not using vanilla extract. Clean off my spatula. So vanilla extract unfortunately does not always work very well with fruit flavors. It can sort of bully the flavors and pull away from the bright fruity flavor. So instead what we're using is a 1/2 teaspoon of lemon extract, which really enhances the Fruity Pebble flavor instead. We'll go ahead and add that in, and we'll stir everything together until the eggs and extract are well incorporated into the batter. All right, we're looking good here. Let's set this aside. We're going to grab a separate bowl for our dry ingredients. So the flour that I recommend using today is not your classic all-purpose flour. Instead, I like to use cake flour. So the reason for this is because all-purpose flour is great, and I will list a way for you to use it if you don't have cake flour, but cake flour is going to give us a cookie that is a bit taller, which is what I was going for with this gourmet style cookie. They just kind of get a lot of attention when they're nice and tall. I know some people like to sell these gourmet cookies, so I try to make them very visually appealing. But also cake flour is going to give you a better mouthfeel for your cookie. It is going to make the crumb more tender, more melt in your mouth, and it works really well with the Fruity Pebbles cereal that we're going to be using. So this is 4 cups of cake flour that we're using today, and we're also going to be adding 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder, 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda. That is sticking to my dish, so one thing I want to do is I want to make sure there's no moisture in here, which it looks like this got a little bit wet. That's something I actually think is worth mentioning. If your baking soda ever gets wet, it is very prone to clumping, and those clumps will not necessarily come out in your finished baked good, and you can end up with tiny pieces of baking soda in there. When you bite into it, it tastes very metallic. It's a terrible taste. So if your baking soda ever gets wet, you are going to want to toss it out and get some new stuff. So I'm actually going to take a quick second and salvage this because I don't want to use baking soda that's been exposed to moisture. I removed the bad baking soda. We're redoing 1/4 teaspoon of unadulterated baking soda, no moisture. We're also going to be using 3/4 teaspoon of table salt, and go ahead and whisk everything together until those ingredients are nicely combined. All right, let's bring back our cookie dough, or our cookie batter. Let's call it a batter if it's more wet. It's not really a dough until it's a little more dry. And we're going to gradually add the dry ingredients to the wet until we've added all of the flour. Now this recipe makes for a somewhat dry dough, so you do want to make sure you're adding the dry ingredients gradually. I usually do it in like 4 parts, because if you add all of the flour at once, it's going to be very difficult for your dough to incorporate it properly, and it could end up really dry and crumbly and difficult to work with. We want everything pretty well combined, but we're also not mixing quite as aggressively as we were when we were creaming our butter and sugar. Last bit of dry ingredients. All right, and we want to scrape the sides and bottom of the bowl because the flour likes to hide out there, and we want to make sure our dough is nice and uniform. No pockets of flour hiding. All right, next, Fruity Pebbles. You're going to need 1 cup of this cereal, and we'll add this in. I like to break up some of them, but you can skip that part and you can just add whole Fruity Pebbles. And then I'm going to fold these in with my spatula, but you could use your mixer. Just go on low speed if you opt to do that. This smells really good, and our dough is really colorful and pretty right now. All right, I mentioned the dough needs to chill, so you're going to need to grab my arch nemesis plastic wrap, and we're going to cover this tightly and pop it in the fridge where it will chill for at least 30 minutes, but it could also chill for up to 2 days. That would work fine. All right, when your dough is just about finished chilling and you're about ready to bake it, you are going to want to get your oven preheating to 375 degrees Fahrenheit. So we're gonna go ahead and start scooping this, and because these are nice, big, thick gourmet style cookies, we're going to be using a large cookie scoop. I'll try to remember to link to this in the description. I really like this one, but feel free to remind me if I forget. So we're gonna do a nice big scoop. This is about 1/4 cup of dough. If you want smaller cookies, yes, you can absolutely make them smaller. You're just going to bake them for less time. So 1/4 cup of dough, and you could bake them just like this, but to make them look a little more uniform, I like to just roll them into a nice smooth ball. All right, now don't put them in the oven until your oven is fully preheated, but once it is, we're going to bake these in the center rack, and they'll bake for about 12 minutes. Mine always need about 12 minutes at this size. If you're using a darker colored pan, maybe shave a minute off and check them then. You can tell they're finished baking because the edges are just going to be turning a very light golden brown. They are still going to be pretty pale though. Don't overbake them or they'll be dry and crumbly. If the center still looks slightly underdone when you pull them out of the oven, that's actually perfect. We're going to let them cool completely on the baking sheet, and that way they're going to stay nice and soft. Now, I like to top these cookies with a cereal milk glaze. It really adds a nice touch to the final product. So to make this, we're going to start by making our cereal milk. Super simple. You need 1/4 cup of whole milk, and we're going to add 1/4 cup of Fruity Pebbles cereal to this. Make sure all of the cereal is coated with the milk. And then you're going to want to let this sit for 20 to 30 minutes, and then we're going to strain out the cereal. So I usually do this when I put the cookies in the oven, but we're not going to put the glaze on the cookies until the cookies have cooled completely. It's good to start this now, and it can sit while the cookies cool. So after your cookies have cooled and your cereal milk has had time to sit, we're going to strain the cereal out of this. So a fine mesh strainer, we're just gonna go ahead and pour it. And then make sure you use a spoon or a spatula to press as much milk through the strainer as you possibly can, because you're gonna potentially need all of that milk. So after we've strained our cereal milk, you're going to want to measure out 1.5 cups of powdered sugar, and we are going to gradually add the cereal milk until we have a nice thick icing. If you find you need more liquid than you have, you can just use regular milk because you really shouldn't need much more. All right, and I'm probably not going to need to use all the milk, but it's better to have a little bit extra. So we're going to whisk this until it's smooth and lump-free. And like I mentioned, I like a nice thick glaze. This dries nice and firm, especially if you plan on packaging your cookies and selling them. That's helpful. You don't have to worry about it sticking to the plastic. And I know it's the right consistency when I lift the whisk out, and that ribbon that drizzles down holds its shape for several seconds before it falls back in or dissolves back into the rest of the mixture. So don't need all of this. Let's bring our cookies back. All right, now I am going to just drizzle each cookie with some of this glaze. Smart thing to do would be to put wax paper or parchment paper under the cooling rack. That way we catch any drips. And then this, if it's made properly, it's going to firm up really quickly. So if you want to add some Fruity Pebbles on top for garnish, which I highly recommend, you're gonna wanna do it right away, like right after you add that glaze or that icing. And as you can probably tell, I'm crumbling the Fruity Pebbles as I go. It's just prettier than putting whole Fruity Pebbles on, at least in my opinion. These are just so colorful and fun. And that is how you make these Fruity Pebble cookies that my assistant is very eager to try. I hope you are as well. If you are looking for more gourmet cookies, check out my blueberry muffin cookies, or I will be sure to link to my playlist of gourmet cookies. I think you'll really enjoy them. Thank you so much for watching.
See you next time.
And we'll see you next time. What do you think? I think they're delicious. Do you like them?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
First, let me add some more Fruity Pebbles on.
We're going to be creaming the butter. All right. Blame that on my assistant. I was sabotaged. Super duper soft, super duper. Can you tell I've taken a lot of time off filming and been spending a lot of time with my kids?
I want to have one more green one.
Sure.